It was a little weird. There's a few points that are weird. I want to say two things I kind of just thought of. I didn't say last time. The joy of being create connects with the intent to create, and then we create in joy. And it's literally like that's the mark. That's like, oh, you did it, and nobody can disrupt that. It can't be disrupted. The other way is maybe at some point there is, there's no need to like derobe or disrobe and kill or destroy all the monsters to the point where once we get to an energetic balance and equilibrium in consciousness, not like unconsciously where it feels consciously like it's just mayhem, but they're slowly like, keeping everything in check in behind the scenes, to the point where, people go to their originating plane. And then if some wild souls want to skydive down into Earth 1 and there's like literal demons walking around and, whatever, maybe that's what some extreme, like extreme sports souls want to do. And that's just what they do. And as well, though, another thing is that they live in the mind they live in our mind. And I don't mean like they're not real. I mean, they get people to do stuff, and then the world that is created, they live in those worlds. If people, whatever world people create, they can't create, so they live in the world of the people, meaning the mind that dictates the world dictates who they are and where they live. So right now they're getting people to create a world where people are oppressed by beings that don't have that connective value, and so they live in a world that they enjoy the most, more than any other people, even though they have the least creative power. So, and as well, the main thing as well, this is with the negotiations, and there's two viewpoints here. One is that we're going to go full force, and you don't reason with darkness. That's the best way to put it. There's no reasoning with the way in movies, and it's also obviously real, although not for the real sense, but in the movies they say we don't negotiate with terrorists, when in reality they pay the terrorists and create them and give them their name tags. But that's the basis.
You get the name tags too.
I love this.
Well, that's the basis
so
of the
true.
idea as far as certain light forces with the negotiations, where it's like, no, we're not going to have a monster realm so we can skydive in and have fun. What are you talking about? This is the beginning. They're going to end soon because we're moving in. But regardless, and I'm not even supposed to say regardless, though. But basically, so the idea is, well, I'm just going to depict something here. So if there is, which this is also what they're saying, but they're saying what's going to happen that I'm saying here is that's happening now. That's been happening for 1,000 years. Now it's over. But the idea is, say, people basically navigate, there's equilibrium, and the balance, the power is not held, in behind the scenes, but it's all out in public. The masks are off, people can see what's going on. Basically, no deception. And it's not the fact that they're stopping lying, it's the fact that we're smart enough to realize we're being lied to, which again, all you have to do is listen to yourself. It's built in, it's automatic. So it's not nothing, it's not like crazy, like war must end or something like that in the terms that people are like, well, there always be war. Well, not if you're not tricked to slapping yourself in the face, and they don't have the power to create it all the time, so no. But it's not that angle that we're going to go to war to stop war. No, it's you're going to stop listening to deception, and you're going to start, and not even you're going to not listen to, you're going to listen to yourself, and then there's no reason. It doesn't even go down that avenue. It's already done. But the idea is, then say people are on a higher plane, and then there are these, you look down, and basically everyone's gone. Everyone gets evac'd or extracted. And this is also, I realized why they were saying that would never happen, because they require reality. They require humans here to create. And if everyone left, it wouldn't be a bunch of beings walking around and they say, well, there's no one left, and they take off all their masks and there's like monsters and non-humans. No, the realm would just close up. It would be like a door closing and the light shuts off. It all disappears, it dissolves. And so, but that was the other part I cut myself off, is that they're afraid that that's going to happen in a way that would be the most horrifying that could happen for them. Is they don't fear anything else because there's nothing else to fear. And so that's why they're kind of like doing this, but they also know that if they don't do something, it's going to happen automatically, because the overminds of the souls that are in group form, that's the parachuting. They already did the parachuting. We're parachuting now. That's how we got here. They'll do an automatic extract. They'll basically just pull their hand out of the murky waters, and it'll happen automatically at the time that they never basically expected it. And so in a true strange form, they're like, well, we're going to die. We'd rather know when we're going to die and do it ourselves. We'd rather kill ourselves. And so they want to have the power of knowing when people are going to wake up, and that automatic extraction is going to occur and the realm's going to close out, rather than, or they want to do it on their own, whether the people know or not know. And because that's the being, a being who is on those levels, they fear the unknown, and they fear not having control, not being in control, not being in power. And so it's crazy. So what does that mean? Well, that means they're going to kill themselves. That's how it computes. Okay. And so, but they're going to do it by freeing us. Well, like, how does that make sense? It's just what it is. Because it's going to happen anyway. And it's going to happen not on their terms if they don't, play the game. And as well, they still don't know what they're going to do, because no one really comprehends. There's no communication. It's all compartmentalized, and it just looks like they're all fighting each other. And there's infighting, when it's like at the highest level, just the end basically coming, and they know it. And it's the strangest thing, but it is what it is. And so basically, if on a different level, we're all up here, and say there were certain beings down here still roaming around, and say then beings wanted to go down and experience, like, I don't know, a knight battling a dragon or something like that as a soul journey, or it was just people in this realm, because we never extracted entirely, and it was just like you could imagine ancient, times or fairy tales or something, where it was people living, and every once in a while, some, badass guy, excuse me for using that language, or lady, goes out, whether it's, mentally and emotional or not. But that's also where I'm hinting at with this, where it's like a guy going out and battling a dragon, slaying the dragon, and coming back. And it's like, that's the type of world people live in. The idea is that, so imagine what that would look like if you have the realm up top, it's kind of like a toroid, and the realm at the bottom is like a toroid, and you have a flux of energy. And so imagine the soul beings, or the guy, he's like, all right, I'm going to go down. And he goes down, and he exists in this world, and they're just like tearing him up, because there's really no point for anyone to be down there unless there's like some type of shift, where at that point it would look like a yin yang, where you have the darkness down here with the small civilization of light, and then you have a counteractive heavenly realm up here with like the fallen beings connecting up here in time and enabling the disposition of energy in a simultaneity of far history and present modern, and modern compared to what would be the far history, which also the far future into the far past, and they flip-flop like a yin yang. The whole point is you would have that siphoning of energy, and say that soul being got drained of all his energy, and he goes down, and he comes back up and there's less, and he's like, well, I want to go back down and play with the monsters some more. And eventually it's like a kid or something burning himself, and eventually then all his soul energy is gone, and he loses awareness, and then pops back up 10,000 years later with the soul again, and then he does it again, and all over, and you have all the siphoning of energy going down. So the point is it would be like a waterfall of energy going. But the idea is that in that system of forgetting, not forgetting, them the lower eating the higher doing whatever it's doing, it's a duality system. All it is a duality system, a toroid folding in on itself. Eventually that system would get boring, and that whole duality universe would get put away in a reality bubble, and then there would be a present omniverse where it's just not a static, but an equalized, like a continuous equilibrium, and there would be no need to mix they call it like oil and water mixing, that you can mix it by shaking it, but eventually it separates out again. That's the duality system, where you have to go through that. Basically, it's like disgusting. Imagine that was your brain and your body mixed up and then refining back out. It's almost pointless. The same thing happens over and over again, and nothing really changes. So imagine then you could have like you have they do like the dish soap, and then like the vinegar or something, I think, and then the water or something, or the oil, and you have these layers. And well, I guess it's the same thing, the oil, but imagine they're not mixed, or imagine even there's like a funnel system where they never fully mix, but there's a continuous, like it's like a solution, but it's in flux. There's ways to describe it, but there's basically no conflict at that point. It's a stream. There's no high, because basically if you shake it, you have a very high, like a solution. I can't think of the word when it's congruent all the way through. There's a certain word for it. Basically a solution, and then there's that's basically diffusion, and then the diffusion lessens and it goes into separation again. That's like a cycle going up and down and up and down, and it continues in that sense, and it gives it a trajectory, and that's variance, but nothing has actually changed. And it's just like the wheel of karma or ego or yin and yang is dualities. That's the basis of duality, like basically fighting higher and lower continuously over and over again. Nothing ever changes, but it keeps having to happen. okay, so the idea is that we're not going to go towards that. It already happened. It happened a billion years ago. We've been in that. That's the one that's ending now. And it probably would equate to not having some new mixture of higher and lower, or maybe it could, but it wouldn't be this. Even if they did that, it wouldn't be the same, because if you have a civilization down here, eventually there'd be enough people where it would just entangle up again, and it would just the same. It would get shook up again. It would just happen to happen. So the only way to have it is a completely new civilization where people are guided with a different energy. There's basically an oversoul stepping down into reality where people are souled beings, creator beings, and it's no longer at that point a void universe with like parasitic beings programming people to create. It's creators in this type of creation space beaming out possibilities out of their mind. It's like a dream at that point, a living dream. But at that point, then the idea of the one toroid with the lower and the higher, the lower would no longer, they would overplace one over one another, but it wouldn't be a lower and a higher mix. There would be no lower. It would just all be one continuous creation experience. And that's more or less what it's supposed to be. But you know, I'm not going to say like that's what it's going to be immediately, or what's happening with that. You know, how the operations are going to be, basically all the other stuff, the operations and who's doing what and when it's coming out and all that. That's, you know, all behind the scenes as far as big stuff. But basically it doesn't even make sense, because the real big stuff is what we're doing here, basically withdrawing from the system. That's the appropriate point. Basically they can't bomb us if we're withdrawing from the system. It's not enabled. They did it last time and it's not allowed.
No.
The Hyperborea and the BUCEGI mountains. Funny conversations we all had about that. So there is at first. I'll tell a few.
There should be another topic, just that experience, because I know it's gonna bring a lot of insights. That should be like an hour or two, just that topic, because you know, when you talk, you trigger us in a good way. You know, you trigger more insights, more ahas, more coming, more, you know, more opening, like what you said, you know, about the toroid field and the yin and the yang. The living grid has the signature frequency of integration. That is, because you say we read frequency, we read vibrations. That's why when we go into a room, you already know what's happening, because you read beyond your senses. You don't just read the chairs and the people and the furniture, and you read the state of being that the beings are in there. You know if they're in harmony or not, whether they pretend or not. And the living grid, when you read the frequencies, that means that you have chosen to anchor into the living grid, and now you can read beyond the five senses. And that means that you have gained clarity, and through this bridge of clarity and the bridge of love that we have created between us and the matrix, and we also honor them as a sovereign being, because when a sovereign being sends a message to another sovereign being, it doesn't tell them, oh, you quit that thing, you know, it's bad, go ahead and quit it. It's also a choice. It's a honoring of one choice. But in the integration in any universe, you know, when any kind of universe gets out of whack and gets out of all distortion, when integration comes, it comes at interfaces. It's like it goes into the fabric of reality, because now our reality has in our reality, through the inceptions of the holograms that you're talking about, it creates a bleed through of reality. We don't get the real projection. We get a reality inserted of us. So just think of a fabric, and then you have a rib, yeah? And now you cannot fix that rib because you don't know how. So when integration comes in any universe that is in distortion, the integration, the living grid comes and it overlays it, and then it recalibrates it back into wholeness of being. And then the Taurus, or all the symbology like the Taurus or the yin and yang, they also come in recalibrated, comes into integration, all the energies. And then if other beings from other universes would like to come here and experience duality and fight with dragons and play that game, they can play it because there'll be no fear. It's gonna be like a game, you know. You come and you kill a dragon. There'll be no fear. There'll be no damage to you, and there will be no rip in the fabric of your reality. There will be no more wound because there'll be no fear. So when I really like it the way you explain it, because you said there is no end, you know, you could see it like an end, but there is no end. We're not putting an end to duality. We are just in the joy of being and the love of oneself to another. The integration takes place, and then the game can continue to play just like children play. You know, they play with the dragon. We all been in universes. We play with dragons, and they never ate us. They never hurt us. We can fly them. We can park them. We can, yeah. It was like very beautiful. We all have memories of that, those kind of universes. So I enjoy looking forward to this kind of integration. And when everybody is allowed to continue that which is natural in the realm of, in all the realms of creation. And perhaps maybe there are gonna be some realms, you know, when people, if they're mad at each other, and you know, maybe they are gonna kill themselves. I don't know, it's an option. I just don't want to make myself a vibrational match to that realm.
Because it really doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because any realm that has pain in it, it doesn't exist. It's not even in existence. Yeah, go ahead. You can explain that. It doesn't exist.
Yes, and then I do. Please do tell me about the Chechi Mountain, what you were going to say. Please do.
I'll say a few things, and we can, if you think it's enough for like a full talk at some point.
Yeah.
Which there is the way it contains a lot of. It's a weird situation. They're one of the weirdest places out of all the places. Most of the operations happen at sacred sites, important events in history, underground, what people call other realms or planets, which are just like, you know, holographic layers, overlays, or different times. So but that was one of the weirdest because it seemed to be the most advanced, other than the technology, the living technology of the craft, and then you know, certain intelligences, and some of the like certain buildings are like holographic computer systems. Certain areas are literally portals to other overlays, other dimensions, like literal like public buildings, like, you know, like corporate buildings and things like that, beyond the sacred sites and whatnot, which are basically stargates. And computers, like ancient computers, like the beginning of the AI that can work plasmically or through plasma systems. Okay, these ancient sites that acted as grids, they were funneling energy in a way that would create a plasma system in the air. So it's like that was a computer system. That's why they're called ancient computers. Like all these rocks are computers. How? But it's because it organized energy in a way that's how it worked. You didn't need a big this big like punch card computational, you know, spring-loaded systems to be a computer. It computed through scalar mind link, and the person that was in the chair or in the, you know, the temple or whatever was interfacing with the computer, whether it was a library or records. And that's funny because that lines right up to what you know, asked about the mountains, BUCEGI mountains. Apparently those were the most advanced, or one of the most advanced. In the Antarctica is apparently simultaneously on this layer a cold ice land, and on the other layer like a lush garden that, you know, has all the life that one can imagine, and is also and because of that, because the system, it's a vortex point, a nexus point, a null point, where there is it's like a portal through to the other layers. And that's why they have all the military there, because it's like, stay back, you can't get past this. But none of that really matters, because it's, if somebody wanted to go there, they go right through. They literally walk through a tank in you know, vibrational form, and they can't do anything in as well. There are beings, because they're just outside the military of the scope of beings who are inside. And to the point, though, if there was some type of movement, the beings that are just inside, basically just outside the prison wall, if you want to call it that, would come right around the edge and basically they freeze frame the military to the point where they would move in, you know, 2000 or two frames per second at that point, and then everyone else would be moving at 2000 frames per second, where you have whatever option, whatever your free will is, it would be enhanced to the maximal effect for a time. It's supposed to be like a gateway, if you will, of energy, where it's almost like a computer system, because this is all based upon calculated computational mental constraints for providing a false reality blueprint for people to interact with. And so, like a computer system, it has to reformat, you know, every Wednesday at 2 in the morning or something like that. So we're coming up to a format point where all the systems go down and they're like switching guards or something. And so every so many years that happens. And apparently it can't go on anyway, because there's enough people that have the awareness of free will that they're immortal, that, you know, you can't actually die. Just like that would be, there's no suicide realm with the oppressors, because if they align with that, well, they prove that they don't exist, because nobody dies in the first place. It's all just energy. You know, it's only a part of the construct. And so the point where, you know, it has its openings or time gates, and we're apparently, we've been in one at this point, which is why all these events have been occurring. And in that time, they've been basically removing aspects of the timeline, events, and it's to the point where they've been isolating lineages towards where it's like certain bases, certain operations, certain restrictions are being removed. And the weird thing is that we don't even know what those restrictions are. The weirdest part is that if we were in what's called, I heard one guy talk about this on YouTube. I can't remember his name. He's interesting. He's far out there, because he's had his fair share of run-ins with these beings, and so he'll get his chance of what he wants to do in the system, or whether he wants to, you know, stay here and party with them as they melt. But I think it was like DepCon or ProCon. I can't remember, but that's the realm below that people have called hell, and not because hell can be it's basically a recycling plant for energy, or it can be a lower Earth, where there's one below us, and it's literally a prison planet. Like, you know, people, you wake up in like a cage, so like that's how it works. And part of that is because they're keeping the humans safe, because there are monsters running around, and if they get you, they pull your consciousness into theirs, and you become one of them. It's honestly, it's like hilarious, because it reminds me of the 80s movies, but like the cryogenic prisoners, one like Steven Seagal, or I think Wesley Snipes did one or something like that, or not Steven Seagal, with Sylvester Stallone, and like Escape from New York. There's all these, like, the 80s had all the information about each layer of Earth in the 90s, and it's all going up. But the idea is that if the time gate opened 10 years ago for us, 5 years, and they began changing things, that means that 11 years ago we were on Earth 1, and nobody remembers it because it flip-flopped through, and now we're on Earth 2, and it's going to continue to continue up. And each time that happens, people are going to, it's going to be like it never existed. That it's like an echo off in time somewhere, and we have stories and myths and legends about thousands of years ago, guys were predicting something was going to happen, but literally that was Earth 1 when it happened. Now, you know, it flows like that, like a picture book or something, or a flip book, where it's like a flip book in motion, where each chapter is a flip book, and it's pretty weird. It's like a holographic system that's also maintained in linear format, but that means you can jump from possibility to possibility, book to book, without actually having to close the book. It, you know, shifts over. It's like a book that's flipping, but there's also books lined up that way. But the point is that there's a nexus point there, where once they bridged there, the military, that's what they found. They found layers of Earth placed upon themselves, and they couldn't go higher, though. They can go lower, but they couldn't go higher. And it's because you have to have an alignment with the central aspect, otherwise the energy is too high. Apparently they go up, it's like as if a person, and apparently the sun is cold fusion and it's hot, but with a certain craft, just simple, you can fly right through it. You know, you can't fly through with an airplane, but you can literally go within the sun with an electrogravitational craft, and it's not going to melt you, but you have to handle the electromagnetic energy a certain way and channel it to the point where your craft would nullify, just like nullifying the gravitational fields. It acts like it's interacting with them in a certain way, like momentum. Just like somebody's throwing a punch. I had to go with martial arts a lot because that's where I have a lot of background. But if somebody's throwing a punch and you equalize your momentum relatively to theirs, and you parry it, and they bounce off you, it has no power. So you can do that electromagnetically with heat, energy, with time, with light. You can shift your movement through these craft, and it equals electrogravitic distortions. But that's apparently how the whole universe is set up. There's a bunch of interrelated relative systems of time, and which is really consciousness, and it's really electromagnetism. And then from there, all the kind of spectrum, the polarization of the various layers of the spectrums of heat and visible light and radiation and movement and all that stuff that's interfaced. But if you have one system that can entangle it and capture whichever aspect of that spectrum and manipulate it, then you have a craft that can go through any environment, can literally go through time as an environment, can go through space at any speed, as momentum and gravity as its own frequency or environment or variable. And it's literally dials. That at first it was dials where you tune in the frequency of the weight that's going to be displaced to the point where now it weighs as much as a Kleenex, and then you say, the propulsion of an atomic blast, which apparently doesn't exist, but 100 kilotons of force in that direction, meaning its gravity is bent like that and the force is increased like that, and then all of a sudden it moves at the speed of light or near the speed of light in that direction. And then because momentum is canceled out, because it's determined by a type of electron flux around the craft, nobody feels anything. It doesn't feel like you're moving. It feels like you're in a room and the world is bouncing around the windows. And it's the weirdest sensation as well, because you keep having to do it over and over again in order to realize you're moving. Because if you're in a car, obviously you don't have to tell yourself, if you hit that, it's going to hurt. But with that, you can't tell you're moving. But if you hit something and you're phased partially into interaction with it, everything explodes at the speed of light, which is where a lot of accidents occurred in the early experiments with a few people. And it's also why cloning helped a lot, because for the people who weren't using it to rape people over and over again, because it helped them understand how to use the technology, which again doesn't even matter because the technology is of the body and the mind. We already have all the possible things. So it's weird. It's a weird game that closes out. They're just playing around with this avatar system. Either way, though, it would be going up to the higher realms for the people that were warring and had the intentions to war and dominate. They said it was like they were going closer to the sun, and their atoms would begin to disconnect, and they would break down into their elemental portions of what their body was, and their minds would fade out, like the description of the guy with the soul going down and fighting with dragons, and over and over again he gets eaten. And each time it's like a little bit of energy goes and goes and goes until he dies at top. But all that means is after 3 days of sleep up there, and like 2,000 years or 10,000 years goes down over here, he comes back. And still it means nothing really happened, but there's a variance, there's a change. The idea was, in this mindset, if a person is basically their egos, they weren't dying, nothing was happening. They didn't awaken their soul level. They had their ego as the forefront, the prioritization of their mask, and their mask was melting, because why would you need a mask up there? And they thought, oh, we're dying, we can't go up there, we're trapped, what do we do? Let's build walls and this, that, and the other, and we need to up our defenses. And they realized that was a joke now, and it's like the joke was on them, and they're real, strange about it, because they have to admit it, and they admitted it to me. Yeah. That if they're BS and it's all not real, but I've seen. They killed me a bunch of times, various bodies and clones, and I've been through different realms, and I've been through different timelines where entire lifetimes existed, and you can do whatever you want. It doesn't end. There's no end. It's impossible. We tried, or at least they tried, and I was pretty much there for various reasons to end everything, to bring an end to it all. It doesn't work. It's impossible. They aren't happy with it, so it's like, this is the trap system. It's like, this is it. It's the end, because we're just going to rot here forever, and we get all depraved and this, that, and the other, and they have like scat porn and like weird shit that they do. And I think there's a word for it, coprophoria or propophoria or something like that. And but the idea is just because they don't know how to leave, and they want to leave, and they can't because they want control and power, and so they're fighting themselves. It's like hitting themselves in the head with a hammer over and over again because they're trying to get rid of their headache. So of course that drives you insane. It's the improper way of going about it. And a lot of it came because in the beginning they didn't have power. They stole knowledge from the mystery schools, and this is leading up to the mountains. They stole knowledge from the mystery schools and began to organize that into free energy. The ark, they said, was a device that you sit it in the desert, and the ionization in the air builds up, and then it builds up enough charge to power, you know, a small village or something. With literally plug in, you have light bulbs, and you know, in the pyramid, how is a pyramid lit up with all the carvings or the petroglyphs and the paintings? There was no soot marks anywhere in the inside. There was no flame lit inside, and there's drawings of light bulbs and things like that. They said they took the light bulbs out. That when they went into the pyramids and they went into all these ancient civilizations, they took all their electronics out. So people were like, you know, they just thought they were heathens. Obviously, they had computers back then, like actual computers, and handheld devices, you know, which you would call cell phones. And it wasn't a phone you go beep, beep, and dial something. It was something that you allow to resonate with your mind, and it connects to the system, and you can communicate to anyone within that village, within that area. And that was even overlaid, and they said they used that because that was the time when the electromagnetic field of the earth began to die. And so then before that, people already had it. You could just sit there and think of somebody, and you were calling them on the telephone. But the field went down, and so they used that to generate an artificial field. And then everything went into corruption, and what was one thing went to another. And so the field began to be used for what? What would you do if you could call everybody on a telephone? You had chips and everyone's read. All right, the pharaohs were basically tricked into using it for mind control and sacrifices and things like that, and putting information out through the towers of how to control everyone and make them their slaves. And when that's not how it began, that's not how the information was there at the beginning. And apparently they say that was because of a parasitic infection which came back from their broken, fragmented consciousness of them trying to leave and being lost in hyperspace for a billion eons, coming back as like these demented beings, which only had physical, artificial intelligence forms because their organic form degraded away and their soul connection was gone. And it literally sprinkled down, rained down into that time period, and it was the beginning of a nanite infection or a parasitic AI infection that jumped into the scalar grids, because when a vortex is open through the scalar grids, it's an artificial time gate that connects through hyperspace from civilization to civilization, space to space, time to time. And you had ancient pre-Egyptian civilization, which was a portal to all civilizations across the earth and all civilizations across time and space. And so it was literally a universe-wide civilization. And they destroyed all the remnants and buried them and took out all the advanced technology. And apparently it was then, because of what they did in the future, that began what led up to what happened in the future. It's a time loop that, you know, creates itself. It's the strangest thing, but they figure it out because they can do little ones where it's like 2 seconds somebody slaps you or something, you know, or you're sitting there and somebody slaps you, and then like 2 seconds later somebody says something and like there's like a snake on the ground, and then you back up and you trip over something, somebody tripped you, and your hand goes through a grid, and then that's the hand that slaps you or whatever. And they figured out ways to mimic what happened. They accidentally enslaved themselves by integrating into these systems because they didn't have the proper awareness dealing with this advanced technology, which is like impossible because, well, what happened in the first place? Before anyone used the technology, what happened? It's like nothing happened. It was everybody was living in a permanently enlightened, if you will, society, and apparently there was no disease, there was no dying, or at least people lived for thousands of years, and those that wanted to die were considered the adepts. And I haven't talked about this yet, but the adepts were apparently those who would die because if you wanted to have children, you would just meet up with yourself, or you would meet up with somebody and you would basically like think of each other really intensely, and a person would manifest into the realm that was a combination of who you both were. And then the adepts wouldn't do that with anyone. They would literally die to one form, and that form would basically go down and like sprout back up into another form, and they could maintain memory in doing that death process. But only the adepts would do that because everyone else would do it through this like tandem process of combining themselves and energies. And it was basically for a show. They did it for fun. You would die if you wanted to for fun, I guess. Strangest thing, doesn't really make sense to us, but if you think about it, it loops back around. And that's apparently how the realm began. That you can't come down and it's just like the worst thing that was possibly there. It was, when it began, the closest that you could get from what it was, and then it degraded and degraded, and now it's going back up. And so, but that was a little bit about how that worked. And I have experiences of Egypt, so there's a couple people there. You know, a lot of what, you know, I'm doing, the way is coming out, it's informed to allow other people to say like, oh, this has happened. this is real. I got memories of this. And then to allow the other people to come out, and there are other people. There are other people who are writing books, doing interviews, and talking about in operations, or these, as I'm just gonna say operations because there's no way to describe what it is. You get picked up and sent to another time, and it turns out that you didn't get picked up and sent to that time. You formulated a plan from that time to send yourself to this time to help nullify the problems that were being in. It's a big, weird time shift system, but that's what it is in the first place. And then there's more people doing it. All you gotta do is search. YouTube is the venue. The internet is the venue used for this. We can't really go around to venues physically and do it. There's too many people, and we're all too spread out. And so everyone has access to the internet. You don't have to go anywhere. The venue is in everybody's house. And that can be used for destruction and ignorance, or it can be used for increasing self-awareness and connecting with the possibilities. And so they had this technology back then, and it began through this degradation system began through the abuse of it, because they stole the original mystery knowledge, which talked about how to unveil the soul and liberate oneself from the lower dimensions, or this duality construct system. And imagine, well, it began when they figured out how to liberate themselves from the system, and from there they then went on to begin to create the system that they all started when they figured out the information that they stole that taught them how to create, to liberate themselves from it. It's a big figure eight Ouroboros loop that doesn't really make sense because it's a paradox. But it also means when we figure out what the original one is, meaning when we vibrationally match with the original state, none of that ever exists. It untangles. The loop untangles and it goes straight. And we really never left the original plane. Somebody beamed out a holographic projection, which is occurring from the pyramids, the capstone. I think Felicia said that at one point, and it's connected to Saturn and what they call Orion. And I don't really believe these far off places exist other than holographic projections that are shining down as if it was a computer system. And instead of a neuronal connection or a like transistors and like computer chips, but as powerful as gas tubes and like powerful frequency based compression tubes, vacuum tubes, laser computer systems, or plasma systems. That's what the lights in the sky are. That's what the sun is. That's what the light inside people is. It's a very, very powerful biocomputing system. And so that's what I feel like these systems are. And some of them are overlaid or overlays with the ideas of the people who left this plane with the intent that they're going to dominate the universe, and came back as the systems that are projecting down to create the false overlay in the first place. I'm actually having a flashback now. It happened twice. Last time was with some people that earlier when I came out, people that don't really agree with a lot of stuff that I'm saying because their memories were cut off. I don't know if I want to say his name because a lot of people get weirded out when they talk about him or anyone because he's a little spiteful at this point, but I would do videos earlier with him. And the last time I had this flashback was then, and I thought about a few certain things before. But basically, the royal families were telling me about this, about how they basically went out with the craft in earlier times and aligned with the Orion faction, which is just means they fell asleep into a dream and went into a grid outside of this plane, or aligned with these archontic parasitic beings, which are like kind of like, it's like a nightmare that exists. And they came back, and in coming back, Earth was born in this enslavement system, whereas they left from Earth, the higher Earth one, and that was them basically deciding to go out and find an Earth to enslave. Because you go out and you don't find another plane. When you go out and you come back, whatever you went out with is a trajectory of the Earth that you're going to arrive. It's like all you do is make a parabola. You don't go anywhere. You arc and come back, and then whatever your intentions were magnified by the dome, or the like the dome of your trajectory, the dome of your like a magnifying glass looking down. Okay, and that's where the experience is exemplified or exaggerated. I don't mean like a dome over the Earth, but a dome of having a variation between the plane of relevance and then coming back down and reintegrating. And the intentions one holds is where you're gonna land. That's where it is. It's not like, well, target Alpha Centauri or whatever. It's literally more love or less love. Well, we had less love, so we go back and we end up on a prison planet. But they knowingly did it. Either that, or they simply had the technology, so they own it. But as well, they lose their soul connection. They can't leave ever. They can't even go 2 steps that way. Now they're stuck, because you can go down, but if you went down, because that's what matched your trajectory, and you try and go back up, but you have to undo that in order to get back up. They say they were banished from Earth 1. They weren't banished. They got lost, and it's their fault. And nobody's going to go down and let them back in and shove them through the doorway, because they're going to explode into a spontaneous eruption of light, and their illusion's going to melt. All it means is their minds are going to fracture to infinity. And two, they're learning why they leave. They left so they can go conquer an Earth. Well, now you got it, but you can't leave. So you have to figure it out and fix the Earth. And in fixing it, they'll not humiliate themselves, but they probably will humiliate themselves, and they did. But they'll find humility, and that's what they were doing. Is they were telling me this, like, yeah, we effed up. We thought we were boss. Look what we did. We do everything we want. And it's like, well, how do you feel? It's like, it doesn't work. We just want more and more and more pleasure and more drugs and more women and children and things like that, and it doesn't work. Now we're feeding the thing that's eating us, and we don't want to keep doing that because we have no other option. So that's what it was. Strangest story, but that was like a weird flashback of them telling me that and showing me, because we're all there. That's the strange part. We're all there, everywhere, wherever anyone goes. It's only when you limit yourself to one are you stuck there. But and that's part of the system that was created. And in the mountains, though, they can't actually access those because certain areas are in. It's like a link, a synchronized link as a channel or a nexus to the higher planes. So it's higher and lower, but we're on the lower, and so you can't go higher unless you synchronize with it. You can't synchronize with it, just like a barrier that holds you back, or it's just fear. The fear increases to the point where the mask that they think they are is breaking and melting to the point where literally you have to literally be like walking through a hallway of fire in a human form and feeling the pain for them to go up. So that's what it was. And then in the mountains, the first memory I have of the mountain is a bunch of military and a few, it's kind of like the stories come out. The secret society members that managed some of the projects, basically is Bloodline elite. And as well, the words don't do justice here for royalty, elite, Gnostic, demigods, immortals, AI, soul harvesters, whatever you want to, it doesn't do any justice to describe who it is. It's all of the above. Teachers, oppressors, lovers, even in a way, whatever you want to call it. Maybe not lovers, but in their own unique way. It was basically like a business. The products became a business of either selling souls or chasing the secrets of reality, the mysteries of reality, through all the sacred sites, through all the beings that they could find and pull into this reality from these alternate dimensions. It became a business of who had the biggest weapon, or the craziest looking monster, or the craziest, super soldier, genetically engineered organism. And so there was a shield that, well, the arc was something that sat there and created energy from the air, ionization, and pulled it. And so the guy touched it and blew up with a spark of light, and he overloaded himself because no one taught him how to properly handle it. That's why only a priest could handle it, because A, they could handle the energy, or B, they knew not to touch the friggin' circuit part. Stupid. It was literally as simple as that. It wasn't mystical. It wasn't like something crazy. It was advanced technology that would blow you up if you touched the wrong spot. Just like if you touch a transformer in the wrong spot and connect 2 points, you're going to blow up. And so, but as well, this created distortion fields to the point where it could accelerate time. That's why they took the arc around the village walls, or one of the, I can't remember what the place was, for 3 days or something like that, or 3 times, something like that, and then the walls crumbled. And it's because the priests could remain 1,000 years in age by feeding themselves off of the energy. So they could sit there for 1,000 years as it's aging them. But the walls that were set up with mortar and whatever it was, after 3,000 years of sitting there, they crumbled. That you could knock them over with your hands. And so then the outer door was like rock or something, but then the inner outer door to the mountains was apparently some type of gray plasma shield, which was it was like a metal combined with an electric field. And whoever touched it, that basically some of the soldiers, there's like 1 or 2 that did it first, and I feel bad for the guy, obviously. They say they go back so he touched it and died instantly. And they say they go back, if that happens, they'll go back in time, and before that guy's born, remove the infant, basically clone the person, put the clone in place, and now the clone died and the other person survives. And that's part of how this whole time game works, that it's like goes on forever. It doesn't, you can do anything. Really weird, but that's, I don't know if they were just telling me that they can do that for that person or whatever it was, but it's possible. I touched it. The first time I touched it, I died in the clone body. And the second time, once I realized, I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and say anything personally egotistical or boast. Once they tell me what it is I have to do, I can figure out how to do it for the most part of whatever it was that I had to do. Once they told me the dynamics of it, that it was a certain type of electromagnetic energy and it overcharged the system. I think it literally, they would literally say it's specific. It's like, it's not electricity that it overcharges your body. It literally overcharges the connection between your soul and your body, and it makes your soul separate from your body, and the body instantly dies. It's not electricity. You don't fry. They're not smoking. They're not hot. It would literally cause a heart attack by overloading. It basically energetically disconnects. So second time I tested it, worked. I went straight through it, and it's not. I'm not really happy because, but I don't know, because I don't really know what to believe. And maybe if you believe, you read between the words and the lines, you'll understand why, good or bad, whatever. Second time I touched it, they told me to hold myself there, and that I nullified the gate so that the military can move through. And then they move through, and once they're on the inside, they can set up an electromagnetic system that disables it. And so they disabled it, and it's basically a big, huge. It was a tunnel, a semi, relatively small tunnel going in the beginning, and it opens up. I think it's split into two directions, and I think on the right there was possibly there, or I think a little bit further back. I can't really determine the depth. Time goes weird. I had small legs. I was a kid there, so I can't really determine how long it took to walk from one section to the other. And they're all adults, so they walk fast. So I have to like catch up with them. Nobody's gonna carry you. It's not how it worked. I don't think, at least at that point. But eventually, at a certain point down, say it was like 5 minutes down, there was a hall that was like a chasm, which would literally be like the size of the street, like out the window. Like it was as tall, at least like 70 feet, or more honestly, like 120 feet, maybe 70, 80, between 70 and like 120 feet tall. And then I think it was like 60 feet across, most likely. And for the most part, it was like one big cylindrical hallway with like a dome ceiling. I think it was domed. It might have been flat, but there was ambient light everywhere. The ceiling had blue ambient light glowing like it was a sky, basically. And the walls had lighting like you would see in any location where the just like a downward facing light that glows down, and it has like a spotlight, and you can see the I can't remember the word. It's like a cone parabola. There's a word for it, where it displays that down on the wall. It was like that, but there were no lights anywhere. It was just like emanating out of the wall somehow. And it was also dark. It was ambient lighting, so it was weird. But it was literally like some type of one of those projections in a museum where there's like the stars and I can't think of the word right now, where it's like it mimics the stars and space and whatnot. It was like one of those in there, and deep in the mountain, and it was like that. So obviously something weird was going on. There was like a electromagnetic plasma gate at the front, and they're not telling. They don't come in like, okay, this is the BUCEGI Mountains. There's a bunch of weird stuff. They just tell you, oh, you have to get through this. You have to get through that. They didn't tell you what it is. But afterwards, once that's done, and it was actually the second time because I wanted to figure out about those things, and they don't tell you. But if you ask, it's about the whole thing is about free will. If you want to know, it's also the nasty stuff. Somebody's like, yeah, I want to do that. You can go do that. And so I wanted to know. And as well, though, it's also, they're not going to stop telling you, because eventually they're going to overload you and they're going to go insane, and they're going to use that to fracture that portion of your consciousness and target another operation. That's what they do. And it always overloads, because eventually, for instance, when you figure out basically that portion of the tunnel, it led somewhere, and I can't remember the exact purpose of that. I think there was 1 or 2 computer systems that were in the wall there that I didn't really have the ability to comprehend. And of course they go in, and it's real interesting the way their operatives go in. They have not decrypted, like I can't think of the word for professional encryption, like expert, not decryptor. It's not decoder or decipher or something like that. But they have those go in first. Those people go in and they look for the symbols, and they try and decode any type of language. And they're archaeologists. They're I haven't thought of these professions for a long time. The people who know ancient language and whatnot, and they go in and they look for any type of message or language instructions that's going to give them some type of ability to understand what the system is used for. And then there are computer experts that know, not like Dell and Hewlett Packard, they know the plasma computer systems and they know these advanced computer systems, and they can literally go in and figure out how to operate these computer systems, because the basic idea is that they begin to run through mind. The computers run through minds. There's a scalar mind link, and they began to use those systems in the bases. So now they realize, and it's from the other systems that they found, that the pyramids, everything is all mind. Why would you not have a computer? Why would you use your hands? And so, but the point is, these systems have firewalls. They have demilitarized zones between them. It's actually a technical term, but as well, military term. To the point where they have to have hackers, crackers for these systems, but it's your mind. Their mind is battling the computer systems, defense systems, in order to get into the information. And as well, the systems aren't extremely advanced. If they wanted it, no human, other below 400,000 years in age and life experience or heart expansion, would be able to get in. They want people to be able to get in because it's a lesson, just like some other systems, although they do it in a strange way where they're telling people, maybe not, because then the overload comes when you get in a certain area. I don't know where it was in regards to that. It might have been on the left chasm or whatever. There's the beginning of the holographic library, and that is a system where I'm pretty sure they set up systems, because eventually then you get the technicians. Once they figure out where the information is, then they bring in the technicians that work with materials, and they hook the materials up to the computers, and they bring it out on their monitors, so that the military brass that can't go and meditate and connect with the computer can look on a Hewlett Packard monitor at that point, or it's not really Hewlett Packard, it's like these glass systems that you can stick to the wall. It's so lightweight, and they can look at it, because they're not going to sit there and mind link with them. And so they set up systems that can break in after the guy mentally breaks in, and then they literally were displaying holographic systems, and it was a record for DNA for all the civilizations that exist on the planet. And it took them a little bit to understand what it was, but some of the guys, they're really smart, so they started breaking it down. And then that's when they're explaining this to me, and as well I'm seeing it. Both them go in and whatnot, and I can also sense his mind because of either the genetics that are way were modified or whatever it was, and honestly, usually it's anyone in that place, you begin to become telepathic, because the whole thing is drenched in this type of scalar DNA activating telepathic life force energy that everyone there begins to become a superhuman. But it's not really any use, because that means the guys that are outside that are already like that, well, they come in there, then you're not going to have any power. But the guys that are powerful there, well, they're not going to hurt anybody from in there. They're deep in a mountain. They can't do anything. So it's all balanced out by whoever put it there and safeguarded it. There's a room all the way in the back that nobody can get into, and into this day they can't get into, because these operate in tandem with multiple locations to control the entire grid and initiate they change the age. When the mind link section of that computer or interface with that computer behind the grid, behind this system is secured or operated, and they're all operated in unison, the next age occurs. And apparently this is how everything has been guided from there on. And this one's been lagging because they dipped out, they left, because we're the ones that are supposed to be in control of them. And instead, because that whole parasite time thing, imagine they're in control, then they got time technology, or the beings, we're in control. And then these people who stole the time technology, they didn't go and set up a way for them to learn, and now they're in control. They went back and distracted everybody, so now we're doing this and looking at TVs and stuff like that, and then they went in and tried to get control of these buildings, these systems. That's how they stole the technology. They stole the realm. They stole the control systems. It was all a big scam, sham, whatever you want to call it, workaround, time loop, buffoonery. But that's what they did. And the secret societies, the brotherhoods, and it also created an Ouroboros system where now they have to make sure they go back each time, or all their memories are going to go and disappear, because it can't hold together, because it didn't happen the first time. And the only thing that is occurring is the first time. So we're in an artificial loop right now. As soon as they turn those machines on, we're there. And as soon as they turn it off, we're not going to be there. And that's the other part. As soon as they operated the machines, which opened the time loop to do this, the whole realm was done. All the operations they ever did was done. All the things they did back in time already happened. And then from there, they went to go back and do it and create this realm. If it continues, which it is, soon they're going to develop the computer systems, IBM, Google, that open up the portal to this dimension that humans got here through in the first place, that they kidnapped everybody through. That's going to happen in a few years. But if we acknowledge it, it's going to cancel it out. Or if we don't let it happen, one or the other. It gets really confusing, but there's mechanics to it. And it's all planned out from there, and they're mapping out how to resolve the system as well. All we have to do is increase the energy in the time loop. We see right through it. It's some buffoonery. It's masks. The masks don't work anymore. Because remember, you know, time loop, whatever you want to call it, whatever, buffoonery system, all right, everybody ignores them and goes to the above. They begin to melt, and so there's many avenues of how their system's collapsing because they've been doing it for so long that they expend all their energy keeping it up. They don't have any energy for themselves. It's beginning to eat them. And so they're trapped by it. And it's also why people want to help. If you have any type of, you know, semblance of compassion, get them out as well. But a lot of the military forces that are working with the light forces know that they're like Decepticons. They're just going to pretend they want help when it's really they're trying to prolong the system. So don't get caught up thinking you're going to help them by doing what you think they need you to do to help everything and move everything along. It's a trick. We're moving out. They can either come with or stay and degrade and turn into the background dust of the universe. And so the point of overloading, which is what they do, like, yeah, we're doing this holographic, that, well, he's hacking in a lot. And they're doing that. Why would they? Well, because eventually they're going to crack somebody's mind. So then they say, here's all the holographic systems. Here's the genetics. Here's the ones that match your bloodline. Here's that. We're going to erase this if you don't work with us from here on out. And we're going to merge you with this one over here. And it's looking like one of the, you know, the parasitic forms, blah, blah, and we're going to weaponize it and create that. So, of course, any kid that hears that is instantly going to disassociate and go insane. And that's part of how they do that, you know, thrash about, and then they give you the stun to the back of the system, and you shoot through the computer, go back to your regular system body, and then they throw that body in a grinder real quick, and that was the end of that. But it leads up to everything is a mind F, because one, if they're just being honest, if they didn't tell me, and then later on, which I've seen already, but later on I begin to see more of these beings that they invented that are like artificial super soldier monster beings. Okay, well, I would have crapped my pants then too. You know, crapping my pants a little bit earlier on, it makes it so that then we can move in and carry out these operations. Strange as it is, but it is what it is, which is why I say good or bad, whatever you want to look at it as, anything they say, we're going to do this because this is what we're doing. It already did it a billion years ago, and they probably weren't the first ones to do it. Somebody else did it. Now they're taking over, and they're trying to take over to gain power to do whatever they're going to do with it. So it is what it is. But it's a big time loop to the point where as soon as the systems they invented were started up, the whole thing had already happened. And times from that point on happening in reverse, leading up to the future, or the future leading up to the past. Because as we're going forward, we're going like this, and that point in the past where we reach is going to, as soon as we reach the future, that point in the past where the devices are turned on are going to be reached, and it's a time loop, and it restarts itself. Very interesting, very strange. There's a couple more of the mountains, and they get a little bit stranger because the other area inside deep is a time tunnel, and there's a base there where they don't want to come out because they're in communication to the outside of the tunnel, which for them is like 200,000 years in the future for us, because you go in, you age at a certain, it's like a 20-to-1 ratio or something crazy like that, to the point where a few weeks would go by, it would be like months to years. And as well, if they timestamp you through a clone system and your consciousness is projected through the supercomputer system before you go in, then you can go in 200 years, come back, and you have the same stun, drop you out of your body, send you to the supercomputer, grind up that body, and the supercomputer plants you back in time a day after you left, or 1 millisecond after you left, or instantly at the same exact time that you left, and there's a loop. It loops not a day, it literally loops around to the same exact moment that you left. And so they found ways to do that, but you have to learn how to operate in a clone body, and it's really weird. All right, that was a an oddity.
A lot of people are going, oh, okay. This is the thing, though. With at this point, I think the more is coming out, and the more we're getting into the original grid, it expands. The more we focus on it. So the more and more of these attempts become visibly cartoonish, right? And so this is what I'm seeing. You know, it's like, yes, they're trying to attempt all these different things, but at this point, I mean, it's literally looking like a joke. There's you talking about some of those guys being intelligent. Well, it's not very intelligent right now. They don't look very intelligent. They look literally like retarded. You know.
It worked before, but it literally already all happened, and we just don't have the memories unless it's been achieved or permitted to the point where, you know, it's not. I'm not going to say they're smart for what they're doing, but they're highly intelligent. It's just that they run out of options. You can only do so much other than break everything that you built through that system and start over, and they don't have that. They're not allowed to do that, because one of the things that shocked them, and I remember that, is that they saw records of civilizations in the system, this computer system. It records the consciousness experience of everyone in a civilization and gives you, if you plug into them, scalar, you get the experience of the entire civilization, and you see everything that happened. And that's how these Zohar, ancient, Gnostic, you know, other religions, all these conglomerate religions would have these stories of the beginning and the, you know, Adamu created from this and that. It's because they had access to these systems. It's literally, no one wants to believe it, but that's what it was. They had access to their secret group who sent them back in time, and they had access to these systems, and they saw literally all of creation. What scared them is that they had the least power out of anybody in that civilization, and they were the least human looking as well, as far as, you know, and as well, they're the least aggressive. They tell us, it's like, yeah, no, they don't, they're so bad. Look how mean they look. They're scary. What do? Oh, everyone loved. It was almost like how they talk about Saddam or certain situations where it's like, yeah, their people are so messed up. It's like, well, what happens now? They're effed. Like, we destroyed their infrastructure. They're literally have no leader. They're screwed. The democracy, they're free now. It's like, no, it's backwards. They're telling us everything is backwards. Everything they're doing is because they're afraid, and they realize that they have really no chance. These beings that they're looking at, they're quasi AI, non-terrestrial beings, but we must have invented them to the point where they're like gatekeepers. They're guardians of the realm when we're not paying attention, because these people are doing things like that, and they know they don't want those beings coming after them because they're going to chase them, and they're not going to stop at anything. And that's what they've been doing, and they're telling everybody it's a war, it's a galactic war, everybody's going to come for you. It's them doing it. They're the ones that are, because they're the humans that feel happy off feeling empowered over other humans, and through that they're losing their humanity. They're aligning with a non-human vibration, meaning they're slipping into these vibrational match dimensions of these hell realms, and they've had to go through these hell realms and live there and rule over them in order to come here and be at the vibration they're at. And that's part of the time loop thing. But it's all free will. Nothing can be done beyond that. But they're trying to convince us it's already, you don't need free will. It's just they're going to do this. And they're going to. It's not how it works. I've seen the devils face to face. If you literally don't vibrationally match with them, they turn into little like shrimp lizard people or something, or like they have no power. It's like Plankton on SpongeBob or something like that. I don't know why I brought up a kids cartoon, but it's literally how it is, because actually Plankton is honestly the archetype of these beings. He's real angry and small, and he's diabolical, and he wants to take everything over and steal the secrets and all that. I think we actually had a conversation about that with one of the groups. We haven't conversation about anything because it's been, you know, I've had 1,000-year-long conversations with these people, and they put everything through art. But that's what it is. They don't have power. They're just trying to tell people that so that they create the illusion of it, and this whole charades goes on. And a large portion of it is because what they saw about how civilization operates in age to age, and the flood and things like that, is that the odds are the least in their favor of all beings. And it's just because they're not resonating with the centralized theme, which is that everything is based upon feeling everything else. That's how it works. It's that simple. It's just everything is feeling everything else. What else would it be? Everything, like looking at everything else, everything else. That's part of the other system.
Yeah, and I see them as, you know, kids that poop in their diapers, basically, intellectually. When they're faced with real, you know, when they're faced with their reality, you know, they turn into a toddler pooping their diaper, literally, intellectually. I've seen that. It's funny stuff. What I think we as humanity have seen enough of vampire movies to know that they always have to be invited. And so once we step into that, okay, I'm a human being, and that invitation comes on in all different forms. You know, and this is what we were talking about earlier, is those doors, the projected doors that they project for people, and it's up to an individual to either step through it, open the door, or say, no, I'm not going through that door. And so, and that's the thing, this is their invitations. And then people can do all kinds of action to open that door that is projected at them, you know? You don't have to, some people say, well, if I say I have this mantra and I say this and this and this and this, and so for that, I'm in my reality. But then when a computer bot shows up and tells you, oh, you gotta do this and this and this so you can ascend, and you go, okay, and you do it, well, you just open the door without saying, come on in, parasite, you just opened the door and you said, there you go. And that is also a consent to that reality. So this is the thing. The people has to recognize the power that we have. We are at the center of this creation. Like Felicia, you were saying earlier, we are the whole. And when you do that, nothing will move you. And no matter what, there's people that pretend that they have real power, but when you really are stepped in your power, and I face some of this, so-called scary people that are doing this, and when I face them, and when I'm in my being, I mean, they're intellectually, they're children pooping in diapers. They're not scary. If you think that the children, taking their stuff and throwing at you their shit is scary to you, then, you have a problem. And you're not an adult spiritually. So, right? I mean, at this point, I'm ready to start laughing at things like that, because we're faced right now, and in even in the alternative communities, people that are presenting sort of this type of information. At this point, some of them do sound like those 3-year-olds, with the really dirty diaper. It's just, at this point, I think we are, because you talked about this just now, how when you really see the truth of it, then you know that that system has it only the mask that they wear. It's the mask that might look scary, but really underneath, they are afraid themselves. They are the fear that they're projecting. And so stepping into our power, stepping into our joy, is when we anchor in this living grid that is untouchable by anything else.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
There is something I can say. It's there's actual power, and then there's projected power. Projected power requires a person to submit to it before it is actualized, before anything actually happens. And all they're doing is saying to the person, give me your power, and then through your power, I'll feel bigger and better. When that's obviously projected power, because if they had actual power, they would have it within them, and they wouldn't have to go through mind games. And then there's they carry, the people doing that carry more fear than the people they're trying to put fear into. The fear comes from them because they're afraid. And so then there was something during the negotiations. Afterwards, we all have to go through a psych evaluation, and they bring out like a team of psych specialists. And the whole thing is a psych evaluation to begin with, because you're going through other realms and stuff, and they're testing which part of your soul is going to fragment and which part's coming back, and they're finding the people who are able to reunify themselves. And so they give you a psych evaluation, and it's like multiple layers and times, and there's all the different agencies and all the different military forces that they're not public military, we don't even have words for them, but they're basically like techno, psycho, spiritual military forces. And they're going through all the questionnaires and the tests, and then they'll turn on the machines again. You'll be placed into a simulated realm, and then they'll ask you to draw it out. And if it expands into something that's like parasitic, it's like, okay, well, your frequencies that you're emitting right now are growing into that. That's where that has to be healed. And at one point I was like, well, what the F about them? The people that are running the blah, 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 all the people in the background that are literally like parasites. And they're like, they're trying to explain it to me. They're running the show. The higher ups are using them to test the population, to get everything over, because they have to have use for them anyway, because in the higher perspective, there is no such thing as delete, throw it out. It has no purpose. Everything has a purpose. That's the whole point. And so this is the purpose for these parasitic rulers. And so I was like, well, you know, what's wrong with them? And it's like, they're like, well, they're not human, so there's nothing wrong with them. That's exactly how they're programmed to work. Somebody created them, and whoever created them from the higher planes created them to be exactly how they are. And I kept pushing the issue, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. Well, I understand it now. And the idea was, if they were human, this one psych expert went through. He said there are, I think, like 31 DSM like psychosis or disorders that represent everything from fetishes to like delusions of grandiose and OCD type tendencies and addictions to everything. And he said they have all of them. Like they even have ones that humans cannot have, that we don't have words for, because we'd have to invent new books to represent it. And so, but that was the whole point, that they're being used to test the system. And as well, it's not like this whole system is a test. Wow, there's somebody running, screaming down the street. Maybe though. It's not like the system is a test. It's that last portion is a test to see who's going to interact and who's going to go one way or the other with the closing out of what this is, which is not a test, but a disaster, a catastrophe from all intents and purposes, all perspectives and purposes. And so, but that's what it was. And they admitted it. And it's not like I got them to admit it or something. It's like they filled me in a little bit. It's like, if these were humans, they're so corrupt, there's only corruption there, and there's no human point. And that's why they're also not humans, because there's no soul. Like, look, you can bring up on a chart, and there's a big electromagnetic grid, and it's like, soul floating around, see, right there in the chest. Okay, and then them, what is that? There's nothing there. There's a little electromagnetic spark, and that's held by a supercomputer system that's projecting them down from an alternate dimension, which is, it goes into a certain understanding, if people know. But they run on corruption. They run on automation, dominance, lack of free will. It's like a reptilian hive mind. And so then the point is that the unveiling of the willpower and the intent to create through joy in that higher dimensional perspective, it shines back in from a higher view, a counteracting force, which would be like a miraculous connection between realms that carries out our will directly to the core of where the changes are required in order to carry out our will. And the idea is, if we do that with more intention, carrying free will, carrying self-awareness of who we are and what we're gaining in the system by doing that, by making a decision, in other words, it becomes the most empowering learning aspect lesson, in the sense that it's an unveiling of the soul, because we know who we are now, because we know who we've forgotten and who we've been tricked into believing. It overpowers any system, that it overpowers anything that could be done otherwise, even if it gets into a really like a kind of oppressive type of mentality, which we're in now, with like this, the talk of war and politics and this, like that. Everybody's just like batting their heads together. The point is, if people look at the system and with their free will demand it to stop, that it has to stop, that it will stop. And the idea is that it's just like variables and parameters in a simulated realm, although it's not, it's a real thing, that the point where it stops exists, and we're at a certain plane, and there's space between it. You would think we have to have connections in order to get into where we're going to make our pathway, or what's going to open us up into bridging us in between. And so somebody's at the door, but I'm busy right now, so hold on. So in the regular sense, we'd have to write a bill, and we have to vote on it and pass it all around, and it's going to have to be displayed on TV. If we go with that, it's like the kids throwing their diapers on, around. It's like, we'll have to let them finish doing that, because clearly they're involved. And no, that's the version where we're buying into something that does not even make sense. It's the pyramid's upside down at that point, and And so, but if we were not going through those routes, that means the more stuff that goes in that way to get in the way of it, the more energy comes down, and it's kind of like a lightning bolt, to the point where there's the more stuff they put in between, the hotter and hotter it gets to slice through that, and the more extravagant power is to connect the 2 points of creation and intention, or the results, and bring them together. And that looks like a miracle. It looks like the more stuff they put in the way, the greater a force comes in to knock them out. And these are basically the possibilities of these beings. These are us waiting to be invited in. And because right now we're just going, hey, Mr. Vampire, come on, you need some blood? I got everything. I got all you need. And so people do that with the other direction. The same thing happens. And that's where the point is. Case in point, they're not humans. They're not sad that this, that, and the other. They're vampires. They're from an alternate dimension. That's why they need to be invited in. People don't need to be invited in. That's the whole point. But people invite the other one. The same thing happens in an opposite, a more constructive manner. And we're beginning to see that now, because we're beginning to see some changes happen, and they can't abridge free will on either end. Meaning as well, that's part of the party situation where everybody's masked, just because the beings that would do that at the highest degree, you could call them, angels or whatever you want. These are like old, outdated, archaic, archetypical terms or archetypal terms. But the heightened, Hyperboreans, the heightened awareness beings, for them to come in, the fact of them just being in the party would go boom, and all the masks would fly off. Well, if people didn't want that to happen, it would be like they were terrorists, and it would be very easy for them to go, look, the terrorists are here, they're blowing everything up, we're all gonna die, because their party cups are, and their balloons popped, and the people are like, oh my gosh, my balloons and my party cups have got knocked over. It's the end of the world. And no, that's clearly has nothing to do with it. But when people are so infantile and disconnected from the truth of what's happening, they could play it off that way. And so that's why they're smart. They're not going to do that. And as well, they can't, because it's not their world. It's technically it's their world, but it's our projection system. So it's not their projection system. It's our projection system. It's our Halloween party, which means we can also make it whatever we want.
We basically have the hand, humanity has the hand on this handle of expanding the reality that we want, right?
No, we have the free will. They don't have free will. They can claim they do, but they don't. And they live in our minds. Whatever reality we project is their world.
Yeah, and they try to convince us that we don't have a free will.
Yeah. It's all automated. Your brain is doing it. Okay.
Yeah. But
that's why living in a realm of the mind right now is a dangerous thing, because the mind is declaring itself obsolete already. It's so messed up, It's like now if you're trying to operate through your mind, just imagine like the living grid, now it's a new hardware, yeah? And then you drag an old software into it. What is it gonna do, You're gonna be all jammed up so badly, and then you're going to think that the living grid is not working. Because
I know, it's like, you buy a new Ferrari and you put an old shabby motor in.
Yeah, and then you go, well, the Ferrari messed up, they messed up, but it's you that you are operating on very obsolete systems. These are old. The old Earth is so old and obsolete. It's unbelievable. It's like cobwebs and shit and goo. Like, why would you take residence in there? And people say, well, I don't live, how do I get out of taking residence? Meaning, why would you even spend 1 minute of your day, of your focus in that? Because that means your focus is you now residing in there, yeah? Because creating and being simultaneously. As soon as you...
Yes, and that's the responsibility, and that's, faking it here. Being a creator being, faking it, it's not sure. Can't fake this. You either are or you aren't. And then whatever, you can't blame them. If you are a creator being, which you are, then you can't blame or say, oh, why is this in my reality? Well, you created it because you focused on it. And that's, I think, the key here that we probably should close up here and maybe say a few more words about what is the key points that we try to bring up here today. This was an interesting conversation, and I think this is the key, is that we get to step into that creator being and take that wheel of creation as humanity right now. And this is why we're getting together and we're talking, and this is why we're recording this and putting this out there for humanity, for, you know, just here's the information free. I have, for the last 2 years, I've talked and I've talked and I've talked, and I haven't charged $1 for my words to anybody. Because this is what I'm experiencing and I'm sharing, because we as humanity have to step into our power and take the wheel of creation into our hands. That's why I keep talking.
Well, from now on, whether you want to amplify the fear, you know, the fear virus is gone, but you can still amplify the old fear. It's up to you. Yes. You know what I mean? And then you will never notice that you turn the corner, like I explained the analogy, you know, when you no longer have a virus, then you may be still in bed, but you know you turn the corner and you are recovering. And but if you don't understand what we're saying right now, you're gonna make pseudo fear on top of the fear, the virus not being there. I mean, that is a layer that is gonna send you to what Og said, to the underworlds of the earth. Because now you're making a fear that doesn't even exist. The virus is gone. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna make a virus that doesn't exist. That's what I mean. Yeah. It's like, wow, you really lost. Yeah, you're really gonna spin into the underworld, and then I don't know who's gonna fetch you, because you know, living beings are not into the savior syndrome. You know, we're not running after anybody to save. Yeah, it's just like nobody's coming to save us. We are in the here and now, testing all the buttons with all the living. That's why I am saying that the 12 original vibrations are living. They are living beings, and I will go through that. Why I mean that they are living beings. They're not just frequencies like artificial technology. They call them frequencies. They're living beings. That's why we call this living technology. Yeah. And then I will explain why. It's too long right now. We have to go have lunch or something. And enjoy our life. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Og. Thank you, Lily. We'll see each other. We'll see each other Wednesday. Is it Wednesday?
Thursday, we have another
Thursday.
And I hope both of you can join our symposium. So, Og, do you have any closing words?
Just a few. Basically, same vibe. That the system, like the cobwebs, the Chevy engine, and the Ferrari, it's archaic to allow and persist, or attempt to persist and thrive in a system where there's disharmony and lack of synchronization. It never made sense. And being tricked is now not making sense, if that ever made sense. But it flew at one point. And it's not like, again, everything has to turn upside down immediately, because again, a lot of people would be freaked out, to put it plainly. And so what we can do is create methods, channels, possibilities where we can interact as a collective with one another through these venues, these talks, or through producing something for experience for people to involve themselves with, to learn from, that will help others interact and integrate this information on like a sliding scale of all the different layers of society, as if there's a central core and then there's concentric rings going out of people who have a proximity to this information, which is kind of not even necessary to say, because it happens anyway, as far as we're talking about a certain level, and the people who are maybe like right outside us will see that, And then when they begin to talk about it, the people outside that level begin, and it happens in a wave like that. No one really needs to have like a central system, but as a whole, that's what it's going to look like. And it's just what's happening, where there's, at first it was just, you know, years ago, you had, again, those like secret groups, not maybe like the negative orientation, but like people who talked about these things, and no one really knew what it meant, other than, you know, those who had experiences or something like that. And there was no real media. There was just like ancient stories and people who understood and always knew that, you know, it's not myth, like this is the myth. That's real. That's why your dreams are sometimes more real than your waking reality, you know? But now it's like, it's integrating in ways where what's going on TV, what's going on in the system, it's looking like a crap show. It looks like extremely distasteful. It looks, you know, a lot less people are buying it. And the people that are buying it are becoming a lot less coherent and in tune with reality and themselves. And they're becoming aware of that to the degree where they're going to act out. Obviously, that's like the basis for a child, you know, who doesn't get what they want. But the people who are aware of that and are basically becoming impervious to that in all likes are increasing. And this may have to do with the explanation we're given that this grid that basically recycles souls is going down, or has gone down in these past few years, to the point where there's no more increasing of the corruption. What's happening here is becoming more and more and more apparent, but they're not getting any more souls brought into the system. It's only they're going out. And as well, you know, that's relatively then with more BS and less, you know, souls involving them with it, it might look worse and worse and worse. But if you put all of that together, you realize it's the system itself collapsing. And eventually it's going to get to a point where the doorway is literally going to be visible at that point. It's not going to be like a big plethora of false leads and trap doors and smoke and mirrors. It's going to be a doorway, and everything else just looks like cartoonishly, you know, out of sync with reality. And so, and again, if we give into the archaic system, or if we interact with it, it brings a feedback. Everything's a feedback system, because, like, you know, Felicia said, everything's life. Everything that you experience is a form of life. It's just either a type of non-reality version of it and we're confused, or a system that we're not paying, or that represents the core aspect of it, and it is the original system, which you could look at as technology. And it's like looking at our heart as a biocomputer, looking at those, then like that's like the original simulation technology, where it's like life itself. This isn't even a simulation if you want to look at it that way, because a simulation has a lot more expanse, you know, variables than this. If it were a simulation, it's the worst simulation you could come up with. You want to do two or three things over and over again. So even them saying that, you know, everything they say, you know, people don't have free will, things like that, everything they say can be used against them to bring out the more expanded version, where it's basically nonsense in light of the higher truth. And then the other thing she was saying, that's basically, I lost my point on the other thing, as far as just the intention. I can't remember what it was, but it was along the same lines that so just the last thing that it's the vampire system and the ideology that they can't do it without being invited in or whatever it is. But if they're sitting there talking and you know it's BS, you know they're just making stuff up that's trying to make a feedback system that will allow them to entrain a person. If a person listens, that's the first step of consent. And if a person engages and then responds, and is like, and basically asks for more, that's consent through silence. And at that point, like interaction is mentally accepting it. But in other words, what does acceptance and consent mean? Literally, like, you have to sign a form. Like, no, it just means that you're okay with it. You're accepting it. It's like, I accept. Well, how do people always tell you I accept when you get a yes from somebody at the store and you're buying something or talking to somebody? No, sometimes when people just sit there and nod or casually don't say no, that's an acceptance. Because we interact in certain ways in society through that, that becomes a possibility for a format for a contracted unconscious agreement in these schemas for control. So in that same sense, the final thing is, if we're in the joy of being and intentionally creating through our free will and accessing the simultaneity of presences of the self through the heart, which is in all possibilities simultaneously, while the mind is only in one fragmented or the other, everything from there, so that's the only format that needs to be done. It's the only equation for interaction. It's the only rule set, if you will. It's not really a rule set. It's just like, what do we want to do? that needs to be remembered, and then once you do that enough, all you do is use the time you have in that small fractal portion, which we talked about, to get that pattern down, and then it becomes second nature. Somebody could hit you over the head and you forget everything, but as long as you're in the heart, you recreate that, and they fade out. You know, they can't put themselves in a person's grid. It's the weirdest thing, but they live in the mind. They literally have to go to somebody in the dream state, ask them if they'll come into their mind, and let them go into their mind and use them to create reality out here, and then they can exist and show up in their fancy car in reality and their, you know, suit and tie and whatever pin for whatever agency they're at. And before that, they literally do not exist in the cosmos. They don't exist in the universe. Strangest thing, but I've seen it happen with my own eyes, and I've seen how they can just change variety of beings and presences and whatnot. And there's the lower portion that does that, because all it is a hyperdimensional force. They navigated out of physicality. Now they're coming back to try and mess around with people and enslave them. And the other side of that is people who navigated out of physicality or never existed in physicality and then always remained closer to the level of God, the Supreme, meaning they were never physical beings to begin with. And they're here to represent the liberation. But what it all is free will from the central point, the seed point of the planet, of the physicality of Earth. If going in without free will is an act of war, and war isn't allowed in the cosmos. It doesn't exist. So that's how it's a creation system. That's all it is. And right now people are creating Rocky Horror Picture Show over and over again. And really it's not even that, because that would be simple. It's like a Rocky Horror Picture Show mixed with like Pee Wee Herman or something. It's like, what is going on here? Like, does anybody know? And mixed with like Ted and what is it? Ted and Bill, I guess, Time Adventure or whatever. I feel bad for messing up the name of that movie. It's a great movie. Or like what's the other? I'm mixing up names. Bill and Silent Bob or something like that. I'm skewing these names, but it's like a really funny, quirky movie mixed with like a horror show mixed with like a kid's film. And like that's where they're putting together to confuse the shit out of people, and it's working. But the point where people are waking up and they're not being targeted. I mean, there's stuff going on, but it's not a targeting by an AI. It's not a targeting by a Decepticon system. There's not monsters running around. No, they're whatever. It's whatever you want with that. And so the people who are doing that don't have that problem. They can't be infiltrated. Nothing can happen to them because of what it is and the way it works. And that's how it's going to expand. And the more people see that, the more people know that. All you have to do is tell them, you have that billboard, that why do you think they're flying and smoking that stuff in the sky to show you these holograms that this is what you need to do? Because it's not what you need to do. They have to spend billions upon billions and billions of dollars and get manpower to do that 24/7 because it's not real. It doesn't matter. Whatever you do, but the point is, just take the second out of your time, your day, which also doesn't exist. It's a variable. Once you create the implant, the idea that you're going to do that, then it exists. And now it takes time because you thought it into creation in this place and dualized form. Once we're out that form, you put 1,000 creations into a single day. It doesn't matter. It's whole, heavenly time or whatever you want to look at it as. And just say, you don't have to do that. It's not real. You don't have to do that. Just that's the movement. That's the new thing, whatever it is. And when people see, they're either going to say, there's a lot of crazy people that are saying you don't have to do it. And they're also not very oppressed and like depressed, and they don't seem to feel very bad, or at least as bad as I feel when I think I have to do it. And eventually it begins to change things. It begins to alter the system, and it's manifestation and creativity, and it's actually how things are occurring, and it's how we did things from the heart, because why else would we do anything differently if we have possibilities of all the potential, and that's what we feel good doing. That was my closing rant. At a beginning, a middle, and a closing rant.
That's beautiful, beautiful rant. We love it when you rant.
I like your guys.
It really is. I just want to add a little bit of humor to everything, because it really is. Our hearts are extremely big, and like you say, once we anchor in this living grid, and we can laugh, we can giggle, we can, through joy express this, because I think this is the form of sort of teaching. We're not really teaching, we're just sharing our own being. And that's how, because this is kind of like, we talked about this, I think, in the past, the 100 monkey effect thing. This is what it is with the heart. Our heart is, when we wear it on the sleeve, sort of, and we put it out there, people that have heart will connect to this information, to this videos, and they'll connect it through the heart. And then, you know, there is going to be those that are going to try to put a mental program on top of it or overlay it with, and you know, they're going to have a really hard time doing it, and their minds can be exploding. But the people that have heart and feel us as human beings sharing, that the power we hold as human beings, anchored in the living being that is us, then it's immense, and it's just incredible, and it's fun, and we should get to have fun in this creation as creator beings and create a beautiful reality through our essence.
That's how joy is spreading already. Even in the ESG family, you know, in the last day or so, I don't know if you noticed, the posts are more about people's children, their families, what they're eating, instead of posting, you know, all these things about this, all the distractions. They are not as much there. It's more their garden, their children, their families, their art, like through this singing since yesterday about simultaneity of being. I don't know if you heard her song, it's just beautiful. And then Reggie is doing the circles, and they, you know, they are already sharing with us, like in a family. We start playing, because that's the life in the here and now, your own experience, not
Yes.
the hologram of deception experience, not what the hologram of deception is doing in Washington, or what it's doing in Syria, or what it's doing in the sky with the chemtrails. That is not real. What is real is what we are sharing. Yeah? It's
Here,
like
right now.
right here, right now, I am playing with you, with my family. Here's are my children. Here's what I ate today. Here's what I'm singing about today. That's real life. That's life.
And that's what it is, I think, with the real life is created by us and experienced by us. And so we're in our wholeness. This is
we already are in it. So enjoy.
So yeah, enjoy everybody. I hope everybody enjoys this talk as much as I did. This was amazingly beautiful. I thank you both so much for sharing the joy of being.
One last thing, that this is actually going to be quick. The media, the economy, all of that. Because I said having a job and stuff like that. It's not that we don't have something to do. It's just that working for some guy that probably does weird stuff with all the money that he makes because he's belonging to a corporation and all that. That's not having something to do. That's having not something to do when you just call it something. You know, in terms of like just, I don't know, I'm not going to name names, things like that. Everybody knows what I mean, though. Unveiling the soul and finding purpose, or just doing something. But the real work is soul expression. We don't have to go to a database and bring up any type of information related to anything else. We just express what we feel, and that is the art form that this universe is designed for. That's soul expression. And the people who are overlaying a schema, an agenda, their minds are going to overload, because when it comes from the ego, you're going to have to keep up, because it's a lie to come from that, because that's not where it began. That's where it projects to, and the people doing that are going to begin to overload and overload. And eventually, the last thing I wanted to say is that if people get this deception, disturbance, infiltration, whatever, even down to like archons sending horrific stuff, whatever, just laugh in its face. Literally, just laugh in its face by realizing that they have to try to do that with all of their possible energy and time, because they don't have the free will to just chill and to do what they want and express themselves and be content with that. That's pretty much this is what I wanted to add.
Laughter, yes, I so agree. Laughter is so, I mean,
Yeah, don't laugh like
the power of a living soul.
Right. It's not like laugh maliciously, okay? It's laugh like the absurdity of it. It's hilarious. It is. It's not funny that people think they hurt themselves over it or hurt each other. But the situation, I laugh, for me, what I meant is, I actually believe that was real at one point. And I really never did, but I kind of like bought into it just to like make things work for a period of time. No. See, it's a childish game. It's not real.
Yes. So, all right, real beings, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.